Hello, everybody, and welcome to my next issue of Personal Brand Mechanics interview. My name is Peter Sterlacci, and I'm the founder of Believe, Become, Be Your Brand, where I work with on-the-move careerists to help them to shift gears, get out of the saddle, and sprint to career success. And so many of you who know me know that I'm that crazy personal branding guy on a bicycle, and that's why I use cycling analogies and imagery in my personal branding work. And hence this was the motivation for this interview series, because I've met some really amazing people in my work who I like to call mechanics of personal branding. In other words, they have tools or like a toolbox of ideas and tips and tricks to help any one of us to build, maintain, and even repair our personal brands. And so today I'm really happy to have Kang on my call. Karen, you are now I've dubbed you as one of my mechanics, and whether you're a mechanic or not, you're officially a mechanic as of today, a mechanic of personal branding. So welcome to my interview.
Thank you, Peter.
Well, let's start off first. If you could tell us maybe a little bit about kind of your backstory. What are you all about, and tell us a little bit about what you're doing before we jump into the questions I have for you.
Sure. So I have over 20 years of experience in corporate branding and now extending my branding umbrella to personal branding. And I was a partner and principal at Regis McKenna, which has a big cachet, certainly in Silicon Valley and pretty much around the world for anyone who was interested in high-tech marketing or branding. Regis McKenna had a legendary firm that did the brand positioning for Apple and Intel and Genentech, pretty much put those brands on the map, and also in the process taught Silicon Valley and beyond how to bring new products and bring these companies to market in a way that they could be successful and make a huge impact on the world. All of these brands certainly did, and Regis himself. So that's kind of my background. It really came from corporate branding, and then I extended it to personal branding because it just made so much sense to do that. But I really do have kind of a 360-degree view of branding because I started out as a newspaper journalist. I'm glad I rebranded so that I wouldn't be out of a job today.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And got into public relations, was a public relations executive, then an advertising executive, kind of doing all these integrated marketing programs before I went to Regis McKenna and really started focusing more on strategic marketing consulting. And I've on my own, or actually had my own firm, Branding Pays now, for about 18 years.
Oh, great.
And I actually had to rebrand at the beginning of 2010 from just Kang Consulting to Branding Pays. So that was a very interesting process and used my own tools to do it.
Interesting. Great, great. Well, I mean, even I think your extensive background in corporate branding, and as you said, a natural kind of move into personal branding as well. And how have you incorporated your corporate branding background into your personal branding work? Because a lot of times we hear people say, well, it's corporate branding or personal branding, or corporate branding versus personal branding. But how do you bring these two together?
Well, in my practice, it has been very synergistic. And I really like the fact that I started out in corporate branding because you have a discipline and there's a real focus on strategy. And so I really feel that I became an excellent strategist working with companies and all of their challenges in branding and was able to bring that to the personal branding realm. Whereas, some people in personal branding, they make you feel really good and then you leave them and you go, oh, now what do I do? So I wanted to reach those people that were thinking, oh, now what do I do? When the rubber hits the road, how do I really do this? And put together the framework and tools and methodology for people to, practically, be able to do the strategy and messaging and brand themselves.
Yeah, I think actually recently it's interesting you say that because I was fortunate to do a great workshop recently at a client here in Japan, and that was the focus. It was really on, okay, how can you use one's personal brand to support the corporate brand, et cetera, and particularly, more kind of practical ways where your personal brand does feed into the innovation in a company, et cetera. So, it's interesting that you bring that up. Now, but, I have been reading recently that personal branding may just be a trend or a fad, that it's just something that's going to fade away or what have you. What's your take on this?
Oh, I don't agree with that at all. Personal branding has been around since the beginning of time.
Right.
We may have not called it personal branding, but guiding one's image and reputation has been going on forever,
Right.
and it will continue to go on forever because it just makes so much sense. People need to know what value you're bringing to the world and what you're all about.
Mm.
So I don't care whether you call it personal branding or you call it something else,
Right.
but that process and that act will always be with us, and I'm glad it will be, because if you look at today, we're very much in an agent-based society. The work
right.
model has totally changed, so it doesn't matter if we work for a company or not. We're all free agents, and as a free agent, you must brand yourself or be left behind.
That's right. That's right. I think a lot of the stuff that even I think it was Dan Pink talked about in Free Agent Nation, and even going back, into the early, coinage of personal branding with Tom Peters.
Absolutely.
A lot of this stuff now, as you're saying today, I mean, you have to do this because this is the reality of the situation now as well. Here in Japan, where I'm working and based, personal branding obviously is very, very, very new. I mean, the words personal branding don't really exist. That's part of my job, is to bring it into the culture. But I think, as you say, when I repackage it as really managing your reputation and why that's important, then it starts to make sense. But so maybe it's the words personal branding. And I think, at least in this culture, the fear that personal branding is, oh, it's just all about, pumping up my ego and talking about myself, et cetera, which, as you know, it really isn't.
Well, Peter, I do a lot of speaking to Asian American professional groups, and one of the things that always comes up in my seminars is, this is against our culture to do this, to promote ourselves. And I just say you're thinking about it in totally the wrong way, because personal branding done right is not an act of vanity. It's almost the opposite. It's not about you. It's about we, and how we can be more valuable together by sharing information, by engaging. And when you think of it that way, then you say, okay, I have a responsibility for everyone to know what I'm all about, and my expertise and my experience, so they can tap the talents and background that I have. And if you keep that to yourself and you don't let anyone else know about it, then, one, you won't be getting the opportunities, and two, the rest of the world won't have that opportunity to engage with you. So it's really not a narcissistic act at all. Yeah. It's actually something that will make the world a better place, but everybody needs to brand themselves in order for this new work model to work.
Yeah, it's I love how you say that. It is this power of we, and I really do tap into that here. And I think when it's presented in that way, it's almost like the people feel like, oh, I have permission to to brand myself, which is very important, because it is so much about how the community and the team, the organization, how they really they magnify your brand. But unless you communicate what it is, it can't be magnified, right? Well,
I tell people to think of it more as education than promotion. And education, as you know, in Asian societies is a very high value. So you have to educate people. You're not promoting yourself, you're educating them, not only sharing your knowledge, but educating about, what you can offer, so that people will understand that. And when people say, oh, I get it, I said, if you can't do it for yourself, do it for your group, because the group will only be as good as all the people inside and how they brand, and companies as well. They're only going to be as good, and the brand will only be as good as all those people who understand what their brand is about, align with it, and then communicate and represent it every day on the job and off the job.
I love that. I love the idea of shifting from promotion to education. I'm going to use that.
That's fine.
Now, you have a new book that you've just released. I'm sure you're super excited about it. It's called Branding Pays, the five-step system to reinvent your personal brand. And
Here it is.
there it is, yay! Now, for those of you who are watching, definitely check out Karen's book because she's on this huge tour now to get the information out there, and it's definitely very exciting. And what's interesting to me, and I wanted to ask you this question, is that in the title you use the word reinvent. Why did you choose that word instead of build or create?
Well, I was working with a book consultant, and I actually got pushback when I used the word reinvent. And she said, can't that be taken negatively? And I said, well, if you choose to take it negatively, certainly, but I choose to see it in a very positive light. And I chose it rather than build or create, which sounded rather pedestrian to me. But the reason why I chose reinvent is to really underscore that we are in a new time. The world has totally changed. There are new competitive forces, new technology, social media, all these ways that we engage, how we influence, how we compete, how we work together has changed.
Right.
And I wanted to emphasize that in a changing world, if you haven't done anything to change your brand, it is time to reinvent your brand so that you are current and relevant for the times.
Sure.
And there's so many people out there that feel like they're stuck in their careers or feel like the world has passed them by. And I want to give them the feeling that they can be empowered. They don't have to be a victim. They can take charge of their brand and actually reinvent things, even if they don't think that they were dealt, a fair hand to begin with.
Sure, and I think maybe that's kind of the what I like to say is the power of personal branding is it gives you the power and the permission to do this, everything that you're saying, and that to me is empowering. Right, exactly. No, I'm just curious, just even for my own interest, what was it like trying to put this book together? I mean, as I've thought about the whole idea, I've got ideas for a book in my head, but as as an author now with this book, what was it like? I mean, was it a was it a roller coaster? Was it fun, or
Well, it was very frustrating at the beginning.
Sure.
Because I went through a few different outlines before it really clicked. And once the outline clicked, then that was everything. Having a powerful outline, just all the words would flow after that. I mean,
Sure.
I'm a former journalist, so I actually write really fast, but I have to know where I'm going. Just like when you do personal branding, you have to have a goal. You have to know where you're going.
Absolutely.
But I put all this big chart paper, stuck to my wall, and then I put chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and then I had colored sticky notes,
Oh, wow.
for the main points, the examples I was going to use, and then the illustrations I was going to use, the models and charts. And then I would change them around because I would start thinking about it, go, no, this really goes here. It was actually a lot of fun if
Sure.
you like that kind of tactile kind of
Right.
feedback.
Well, it sounds, I mean, it looks great, and I'm really excited for you. And I've been watching some of your appearances on the news and everything, and it just must be an exciting time. And one of the things that you talk a lot about, it's on your site, which is brandingpays.com, correct?
Yes.
But you've talked about this in your other interviews, but I love your bake the cake, then ice it analogy. And so for personal branding, can you tell us about that and why? I mean, why did you use the cake as an image?
Well, I wanted to come up with a simple metaphor for branding. And before I get into why I chose it, the cake is your rational foundation. It is that rational value, your reason for being, if it will, the experience, your expertise, your functional value. And the icing is is your emotional value, how you connect with people emotionally, your image, how you look, your personality, your trust factor, your empathy, all of that goes into the icing. And a lot of people, they don't want to start with the cake because that's difficult to figure out.
Right.
So they immediately go generally to tactics. Just got to get there out there on social media. And I said, no, 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 you got to bake the cake, then ice it. So it's just kind of to get people to say, no, I know it's hard, but you got to bake the cake first. You got to have a foundation or a rational foundation, because if you just go to cosmetic things,
Sure.
it's like putting lipstick on a pig. You know, in the end, you still have a pig, you know, with bright lipstick on. Yeah. I don't know if they have that, that saying in Japan.
No, no, but it's a great, I love that. That's a perfect example too. And so now why the cake? I mean, why did you choose a cake?
Well, I actually had come up with different metaphors along the way, and they didn't stick until I started using this cake and icing thing, which everyone seemed to understand. Now, there may be some cultures that don't have cake and icing, and I may have trouble when I go international, but so far, people really, really understand it. And
Sure.
it's very simple. So, okay, got to bake the cake first, got to do all the stuff. I got to have this recipe. I've got to go in the oven. And then you go, okay, now I've got to ice it. I got to decorate it. You've got to make it appealing to people. How am I going to do this? And so they really understand this. I had one engineer, a female engineer, come up to me after a talk, and he said, oh, I finally get it. I'm all cake. I have no icing.
Perfect.
I
Perfect.
thought that was hilarious. And I said, but there's hope. Now you know, so you can work on it.
Yeah, because as you said, I mean, if you've got that foundation, then, you can put the icing on it versus starting with the icing. And I think a lot of times, when you think about the icing, we want to eat the icing first, put, especially eat the icing right from the jar, so to speak. But I think it's a great analogy. I really like it, and I think it would definitely work here in Japan as well. So if when you move into promoting the book in Japan, let me know, and we'll get people out there with their cake and icing. I wanted to, as I said before, I've dubbed you now as a mechanic of personal branding, and I'm going to use my famous cycling analogy here that I ask everybody, and basically it's simply this. I'd like you to imagine that someone's personal brand has a flat tire, and they really can't move forward. And what advice would you give to this person so they can really, pump up their tires and get their brand riding and moving forward again?
Well, I think that the main reason why people have a flat tire is they haven't figured out, their niche to own. You really have to have an area that you can be expert in, or that you have some thought leadership for. Right. Because today, it doesn't make sense to be a generalist. If you're a generalist or generic, you're expendable. Right. So if you don't want to be expendable, and you want people to say this person has value, and you want people to endorse you and to help you out, then you have to have something that the market wants. So what is it? What is it that you can do? And I kind of look at this triangulation model of looking at what the market needs, what particular strengths or unique value you have, and then looking at the competition, and then keep on iterating that until you can figure it out. And if you can do that, then you'll be well on your way to pumping up that tire and winning the race.
Great. No, that's perfect. I love that. I mean, and we talk about that all the time, even in the work I'm doing with branding here. And I'm just curious, as you mentioned earlier that, you do talk to groups of Asian Americans as well. But if you could give another piece of advice for the Japanese listeners who watch my interviews, what advice would you give my Japanese audience for personal branding, and why it's so important to be thinking about this in this day and age?
Because you no longer can just expect your boss or your company to promote you. Even in a society like Japan, where before companies would take care of you forever and you would have employment forever, that isn't happening anymore. You're actually finding reductions in the workforce in Japan as well. It's the new global economy that we're in. So given that, if you just rely on someone else promoting you, and suddenly you don't have that relationship with that company or that boss anymore, you're kind of left afloat. And all this time where you could have been building up your personal brand in sync with the company brand, now you don't have anything and you have to start from scratch. So I would encourage everyone to work on their personal brand, regardless of whether they think they're going to be with their company forever or not. You need to brand inside your company as well as outside the company. Sure. And when I look at someone like Tony Hsieh, who's the CEO of Zappos, which is an online retailer here in the United States that does fashion and shoes and is really known for customer service. Now, Tony has written a book called Delivering Happiness, and he has a personal brand around this whole kind of management and also life philosophy. And that brand, that thought leadership will stay with him even if he gets separated from Zappos.
Sure.
But right now that he is the CEO of Zappos, it's come together, and all the people in the company, it's become the employee culture, the customer service culture, and everything that they, breathe, think, do at that company. So that's an example of a personal brand of a leader, really helping to push their company forward and be known for something, but also that leader having a personal brand that if that leader ever got separated, their brand could still live on.
Right. That's great. That's great advice. And I think what I'm finding now, in my work in particular, it's the younger generation. I've been asked a lot to come in and speak at universities, for third-year students or even in MBA programs. These are younger individuals who they know that they're entering this workforce that you've already mentioned, and so they don't even expect the lifetime employment model anymore, versus kind of the mid-career person who might find themselves in the situation that you're saying, where they are suddenly out of work, and that was never something that they ever thought that would ever happen, and why it's so important to be preparing, for something like that. So that's kind of the two audiences that I'm seeing here. But I love what you said about, don't wait for your company or your boss to recognize your talent. One of the myths that I find here is simply that if you just work hard enough, you will be rewarded. And guess what? As you've said, that those days are really ending. So, well, what's new on the horizon for you? I mean, I know you've got the book tour and all that, but anything else happening in the near future?
Well, I'm doing a lot of talking, at business schools, and I just got back from San Diego, where I was at University of California, San Diego, talking to 80 med students about why doctors have to brand themselves. Because again, things are changing in the medical field. And when you were just, you just got your MD degree and everything was set, it's not that way anymore. Exactly. With all this managed care and healthcare reform and what have you, doctors have to think about how do they differentiate? How do they stand out?
Sure.
If they go into private practice, there's certainly going to be tremendous competition.
Exactly.
So even if they're with a healthcare provider, they still need to brand themselves. So, and it's something that certainly medical schools don't teach. Even when I go to business schools, they don't teach it either. So people are saying, we know this is so important for our careers, and yet we haven't a clue as to where to begin.
Great. And so, yeah, I think, as you said, finding these pockets of individuals, where they realize that in the past they didn't have to worry about that really their degree and their credentials opened up the doors, and now that's changing too. So, well, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? Your website, or what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yes, they can get in touch with me at info@brandingpace.com. And I'm also on Facebook. I have a Branding Pace page. LinkedIn. I'm Karen Kang at LinkedIn. So, and I'm at Karen Kang on Twitter. So people can choose their favorite platform, favorite mode of communication, and reach out to me. I'm really happy to do that, and I'm happy to try to answer as many questions as I can for people. But I just wanted to underscore that I do both corporate branding and personal branding still yet. And a lot of times when I'm working on corporate branding, then the companies will say, well, you help our leaders then to have a personal brand that is in alignment with our corporate brand and be able to take that out to the world. And so that's why I see it being so synergistic, and the things that I've learned from corporate branding go to personal branding, and the consumer branding, if you will, and the social media stuff then comes back to the corporate branding.
Absolutely.
So I see it very, very synergistic. And I think it's really exciting, the kinds of opportunities I have now that since the book has come out, the phone has been ringing off the hook.
That's great.
I've gotten all these LinkedIn things. I'm actually going to Kona, Hawaii for a paid consulting and seminar gig next month. And you can't get anything better than
No,
that,
you
can you?
can't. You cannot. I mean, that's so cool. Well, maybe, maybe in the future it'll bring you to Japan as well, and I would welcome to meet with you while you're here, and probably set up some talks for you while you're here. Are you thinking about eventually having the book translated into other languages? Is that on the horizon, or?
Yes, I am. I actually had a Chinese publisher with one of the big international
Right,
MBA schools reach out to me about translating the book to simple Mandarin.
right,
And certainly I have, I want to translate it in multiple languages. But first, I've got to make sure that the book is launched properly in the United
right.
States,
Yeah,
and then all these other opportunities will come. But
sure.
I've gotten requests to go to Barcelona and Madrid and Switzerland and all kinds of places. So I'm sure that the international tour is not far behind.
That's great. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations, and I mean, you're an inspiration. I hope to someday be able to get whatever book that I have out there, and to follow in that path as well. And thank you so much for your time. I wish you continued success on the tour, and the speaking engagements and everything else. And it's been awesome connecting with you.
Well, thank you, Peter. It's been great doing this. And if you have any questions about writing your own book, just holler.
Oh, I probably will. So thanks again.
Okay,
Bye
bye-bye.
bye.